Welcome friends once again to the Bhagawad Gita Satsang, and we go through a verse from chapter 6, and the verse number is 30. It says, "He who beholds me everywhere and who beholds everything in me never loses sight of me, nor do I lose sight of him." This particular stanza, Swami Ananda tells us that our Guru Paramahansa Ananda would often quote it, and every time he would quote it, the tone of his voice and the expression of his face was so blissful. And this verse tells us that we should never lose sight of God. And it is when our heart and our mind wanders away from Him, that is when we lose sight of Him. And Yogananda ji was actually, when quoting this verse, trying to make them understand, the monks, that God is ever near. He is our dearest friend. What makes Him seem far is our own indifference. So we need to learn to unite our mind and heart with God, bringing God in connection with all that happens, all that we do. For it is actually that whatever we do is a part and parcel of God only. Whoever we meet is a part of God only. Everything is God, and it is for us to make the effort to bring Him in our thoughts and in our feelings, not only just in meditation, but in all the minutes, all the hours, all the days and years of our lifetime. That is the meaning of He never loses sight of me, I never lose sight of Him. So beautiful. And then, how do we do it? Because it's a nice concept. It's a nice point of view. But we need to make a truth out of it. We need to just not only see it that way, but we need to feel it that way. So, for that, the one and only way is constant, regular practice, patiently done, bringing in the presence of God in our life. Now, patience is not a very likable word, but Swami Kriyananda said, patience is the shortest route to God. It seems contrary, but it's not. Because true growth happens by patient, persistent practice. We feel, okay, some dramatic moments should come into our life. We should have visions. We should suddenly see God. All these things, dramatic moments do happen. But basically, all growth takes place with regular practice, patiently done. It comes to mind that we have a few examples of how saints managed to do it. Mother Teresa, she spent her whole life serving the poorest of the poor, and many of the times she had to be helping people in their last moments. People were dying and she was helping them to die with dignity. And this miraculous task which she did, it began with a spiritual experience. Very soon after she had got the Nobel Peace Prize, she gave a talk in that she spoke a lot about patience. And she said that she had a spiritual experience only once, right in the beginning of her service. Rather, before her service began, Jesus came to her and told her what he expected her to do. After that, she did not have like that kind of spiritual experience, and she had a long life. But in all her life, she didn't have that spiritual type of dramatic experience, but she had day to day spiritual experiences. And she tells us that as she would do all that she needed to do day after day for such a very long time, somebody asked her, Mother, how do you manage to do all this? To clean people, to help them in their very, very difficult times. How do you do it day after day? And she answered, this body and all other bodies I consider as Jesus' body. She was practicing the presence of God as she was doing her daily works, services. One day, a young nun, one among her team, brought from the street a dying man, which they usually do. They bring the people from the street who are poor, who are ill, who are dying, they bring them home. And it was a very difficult thing to bring this man home. And he was in a very bad shape. He was very, worms had eaten up his body. As they brought him, even his skin was not coming away from the street floor because it was getting stuck there. Yet they managed to bring him. The nun cared for him, cleaned him, and when he died, he had a smile on his face. And after he passed away, Sister Teresa came to this young nun and asked her, what did you feel? What did you feel? And the young nun said, Mother, I never felt the presence of Jesus. But this time, when I cared for this man, I actually felt that his body was the body of Christ. This is how Sister Teresa, Mother Teresa, and her nuns would work, would serve with God in their hearts and in their mind. And this is actually, how do they come to that point? So we read about many more saints and we are inspired by their stories and how they came to feel the presence of God continuously with them. And it comes to mind about a saint called Frank Laubach. There is a book called Letters of a Modern Mystic, and it is Frank Laubach's letters to his father. He was actually a Christian minister, not a minister, a missionary, and he was placed in Philippines in the 1930s. And he found that the people did not understand his language, and he did not understand their language, and they were not interested in learning about Christianity. His family was not with him, he was all alone. So he had a lot of time on his hands. So he decided to practice the presence of God. And he began with the great unsuccessful attempts. And in his book, he writes all about honestly his failures, as how he tried and tried with regular, constant, patiently practicing the presence of God. And that is why it is very interesting to read the book, because it is so honest. It is so normal that he started with that and he tried to make a conversation with God. And slowly, as he progressed, he started having improvements. And he honestly wrote about the improvements also in the book. And then he started feeling that the words were not made up by him, that they were coming from another consciousness. God's consciousness. And it was wonderful that he now not only could think about God, speak to God, hear God, but slowly he learned the language of the Philippines people and he could now serve them. And of course, he did not teach them Christianity, but he could teach them to read and write. So he did teach them to read and write. And now he saw that it was God not only speaking through him, thinking through him, but also acting through him. And that is the basic principle of Karma Yoga. So he was doing that, and it takes regular practice. It comes to mind that Swami Kriyananda one day asked in a gathering that what would you call a sound which was there before you were born and it is still there and it is unchanged? So nobody could answer this question. And he said, you would call it silence, wouldn't you? But since there was no reference point, absence of sound was not to be understood because it was the sound of Om, the sound of our own being. And how do we get to that? Learn to hear that sound of our own being. If we can, cut off all the sounds to which we are exposed to and not necessarily the ones which are outside, which is the least of the problems, but the sounds which are inside in our mind and the thoughts. And when we try to be quiet, the sounds start coming with different volumes and different intensities. If we can quieten them, we will learn how to hear the Om sound. In the same way, if we would say that there is a living, loving presence, it was there before we were born. It is there still up to now, and it is unchanged. What would you call that? The audience of this satsang would surely say God, but the world may not understand that because they would just say it is not the presence of God, it is the absence. But to also learn to feel the presence of God, we have to do the same thing that we do to hear the Om sound. First is relax, then is concentrate, and then to deeply listen. But in the case of the living presence of God, we can also say deeply feel. And that feeling we have to try to feel in our hearts. And that is how we get to understand the presence of God in our hearts. And as we keep practicing, we need patient, persistent practice. And as we go on practicing, we come to a place where God's love, God's joy will be ours and the octave of our life will be lifted. God bless you. We'll close this.